7:01. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the regular City Council meeting for the City of Nisswa to order. It is Wednesday, July 18th, 7:01 p.m. Would you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome to everyone. The first item on the agenda tonight is the consent calendar. And are there any additions to that, or would there be a motion to?
I'll move the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Gary Johnson. Any discussion about any items on there this evening? I guess one thing that I just wanted to bring up and touch on a little bit is not really for any action or anything, but I saw the report from Matthew Hill in Parks and Rec about the Friends of Nisswa Lake Park and kind of where that's going, and wonder if I would probably like to have some more discussion. Maybe other council members would like to have more discussion, not now, but in the near future about that. Kind of try to get a real feel for what's going on. But no, I don't have any questions or changes. So, anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item C on the agenda this evening is open forum. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda? If it's on the agenda, we will offer time to hear public comment during that discussion, during that item on the agenda. Seeing none, we will move on from open forum to D, which is City Administrator Clerk Report. First off.
Thank you and good evening, City Council. I have nothing separate to report aside from the items that are on our new business for tonight, unless there are questions that I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Any questions for the Administrator? Second, City Attorney Tom Pearson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Under my agenda item, you see that I've got a proposal from Land Design Solutions for some legal descriptions for the Camp Lincoln Road issue. That thing's been kicking around for quite some time. If anybody needs a refresh on what that is or what the need for this is, I'm happy to provide that. Otherwise, these legal descriptions will help me obtain that revised court order, which will fix that street vacation problem from 13 years ago.
Anyone have any questions for City Attorney on that?
I'll move that we authorize the expenditure of funds for the Land Design Solutions on Camp Lincoln Road, not to exceed $1,500.
Is there a second to that? Seconded by Kramer. Discussion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. City Engineer, Mr. Hallen.
Good evening.
Do you have anything for us?
Just a few quick updates. Justin Schultz from our office, last week he with city staff held the pre-construction conference for 2018 street improvement projects. So Knife River attended that. They'll be submitting the city's schedule. Looks like they will not be starting on the actual project till later in the month of August. And then proceeding through the substantial completion is the end of September. So that's the schedule. And then he also attended, I'll say, the first meeting of Parks and Recs group on the bike trail system on Thursday last week.
Okay.
Yep. That's it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, in a way, I think that's kind of a blessing that if the street projects don't start till close to the end of summer. There's obviously many more times the number of vehicles and people in the area right now, so this probably works out good for the city as well. That's it for reports then. We're going to move to item E, new business. Public hearing for proposed tax increment financing, District Number 1-13.
Mr. Mayor, I move we open the public hearing.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Carl Kramer. Do we need to vote on that, or is it just, we could, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we have Tom Denaway here with us from Springstead tonight. He's going to do a quick overview or a shortened version of the presentation from last month for the public and for the public hearing purpose. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Tom Denaway with Springstead Incorporated. We're the city's economic development advisor. A little bit about Springstead is we are a public financial advisory firm. We only do work for cities, counties, and school districts. We don't do any work for private development. Tonight, yes, I will be providing an overview of tax increment. Again, it might be a bit redundant for those that watched the presentation last month, but we did want to provide an overview again for the public that might be in attendance to make sure that everybody was on the same page as to what tax increment is. So we'll go over TIF, and then we'll start talking about the specific project that we're looking at here and some of the details related to that. So to begin with, TIF is a method of capturing the tax base growth resulting from new development. So projects that are eligible to be created within a TIF district, the new taxes that project would create are eligible to be captured and used to pay for public improvements related to that development. The taxes that get captured are applicable to the future city, county, and school district, as well as the miscellaneous tax rates, the watersheds, and the like. So it's the future tax growth that's going to be generated by a new project is able to be captured and used to help offset costs that were incurred with that project to help make that project feasible. There's a fixed term for the capture, and then that new development then gets added to the tax base. So tax increments defined by state statute, it's constantly being refined by the legislature, hopefully not again this year or next year, but they have been tweaking it over the years, making it more restrictive and more limited in its application. The purpose of the use of TIF is as a gap financing tool. It's to make projects occur that would not otherwise occur. There's a test that needs to be analyzed as part of the creation of a TIF district, and it's called the but-for test. It's the finding that this project would not occur but for the assistance that's being provided by the city. So we want to make sure we're assisting projects that wouldn't otherwise happen. We don't want to have to assist a project that would have happened on its own. We want to make sure we're only using government funds as a means of last resort and to make projects that wouldn't otherwise happen. So that's what's known as the but-for test. TIF is used mainly by cities and counties, and depending on the year it's created, there's certain compliance requirements and abilities for the use of it. And it helps to provide an incentive for the development or helps to offset costs related to that development to make that development feasible. So depending on the type of TIF district, there's certain criteria that need to be in place. And certain terms for the use or for the length of that district. What we're talking about tonight is a redevelopment district. So for a redevelopment district, we have to have a heavy blight and concentrated development. We need to have a site that has buildings and development on it. We don't want greenfield sites being claimed as redevelopment because that's obviously would not be in line with the goal of statute and the legislature in creating that power. We want to have a site that is occupied with a building and that building is in fact blighted. As a result of redevelopment districts qualifying, they're able to have a term of 25 years, and these are terms from the year of first receipt. So it's actually 26 total years of receipt for the maximum length of a redevelopment district. So 25 years from the first receipt is the way it's referred to in statute. So with tax increment, we can fund certain things based off of statute. We can fund public improvements, streets, right-of-way, sidewalks, and the like. We can fund acquisition of development sites. We can fund soil correction and site preparation and demolition. When we talk about site prep and demolition, we commonly use the phrase ground and down. So things that are going to be going into the site either on the ground or down below that. So utilities, sewer, water lines, the like, as well as parking lot, pavement, some landscaping, those kind of things. We can also use TIF for relocation where necessary. And we can also use it to reimburse the developer for financing fees, capitalized interest, and regular interest incurred on the financing of the project, or the financing of the public improvements that are being reimbursed, I should say. And we can also capture TIF for up to 10% of the TIF for city administrative costs, a cost of reporting on the district each year to the Office of the State Auditor, a cost of auditing, a portion of the city's overall audit could be applied to this. A portion of the staff time for managing the district can fall under that administrative cost of 10%. But it is not a blank check, and these things, revenue captured under this does need to be used specifically for the administration of the district. We can't just lump in other city general fund costs under that. They have to be specific to the district, and the legislature or the Office of the State Auditor is consistent on that and does occasionally do checks on what those funds were used for. So you have to be able to document what those expenses were and how the amounts were arrived. So when we talk about TIF, we talk about funding things on mainly two different ways. So TIF is a future source of revenue. It's revenue that's going to be coming in this case, potentially over the next 26 years. So how are we using that future revenue to pay for development costs that are going to be incurred today? There's two ways we can go about using that future revenue to pay for costs. The first way is what's known as pay-as-you-go. So the developer in this case would pay for the public improvements or the improvements that would be TIF eligible, and then they would be reimbursed by that tax increment over time as it's generated. The reimbursement's limited to the amount of TIF that's collected. When we talk about these two different types of use of TIF or how we're funding these, we're talking mainly about who's taking on the risk of that future tax revenue performance. Future TIF revenues are subject to future changes in market value, future tax law. Right now we're assuming that everything's going to remain level, but there are potential for future changes in the way the tax law occurs. Back in 2002, there was a significant change in tax law, and that significantly reduced the amount of property taxes that were being paid by commercial property in particular. So when we talk about pay-as-you-go, we're talking about really, in most parts, putting that burden that the future TIF revenue is going to come in as projected on the shoulders of the developer. The other way we can go about doing it is cities can do it in certain circumstances for very unique projects or very transformative projects. Cities can issue general obligation tax increment bonds. They can take that risk. They can fund that project cost now. They can issue debt to do that, and then they can capture that future tax revenue to repay that debt. What happens in that case is instead of that future risk, that performance risk being on the developer's shoulders, it falls onto the city's shoulders. So the majority of TIF districts we do are pay-as-you-go districts, and occasionally we'll see a tax increment revenue bond, but it is really only in circumstances of really transformative projects. So what we are talking about tonight is a pay-as-you-go district. So how is a TIF district created? First off, the city has to have a development district. That's a larger area within which TIF districts are created. The city has one of those in place. The boundaries of that development district are the city's boundaries. So nothing has to be modified or created there. Excuse me. And within that, we can create individual TIF districts. So when we create a TIF district, we create a TIF plan. And that plan sets the budget for the district. It sets the revenue projections for the district. It describes the activity that's going to occur within the district. It sets the geographic boundaries of the district. It says what area are we going to actually be seeing development, and where is that development going to occur, and what is going to occur on it, and what are the revenues that are going to be generated by that. And that same geographic boundaries defines where we can spend those dollars. You have to spend up to 80% of the TIF revenue, 75% of the TIF revenue within the boundaries of that district. Sometimes cities will have flexibility, depending on the type of project, to pool and spend outside the district that is limited by the type of district that's in place and by the pooling requirements. I think the city in the past has used some excess TIF dollars to fund other things outside of existing districts, but within the larger development district, that's why we set that. The larger development district sets our pooling boundaries. So there's not any pooling being proposed for the project tonight, but that is something that's been utilized in the past by the city and other cities. So as part of the process, we have to hold a public hearing, and then following the public hearing, if the city were so choose to adopt a district, we would then certify to the county and the state. So again, the process for approving a district is approximately 60 to 90 days. It includes notifications to the county and school boards. We have to send them a draft version of the TIF plan 30 days prior to the public hearing. When we do that, when we send that TIF plan to the county and school district, that sets our budget for the district. We can go below that number, but we can't go above it. We're showing them what the impact of the district is going to be. We can lessen the impact, but we can't increase it. So that's similar to the way a city would set a preliminary levy in August or September when that portion gets adopted, that preliminary levy gets adopted, you can go below that, but you can't go above it. So the same thing with the TIF district. We can go below the number we sent to the county and school district, but we can't go above it. Additionally, we have to have a publication of the hearing of the publication of the hearing notice, which was done 10 days prior to today's meeting, so that notice has to occur no less than 10 days before the meeting and no more than 30. We usually have a planning commission review. It's a little different with the city of Nisswa, where the city council, actually one of the things that you will be finding as part of your adoption of the resolution tonight, if you were to adopt it, is that the project conforms to the overall plan for development of the city as a whole. It's just a simple finding that whatever is being proposed within the development conforms to the city's comp plan. Legislature wants to make sure you're not, approving a water park in a residential neighborhood or they want to make sure that whatever is being created within a TIF district conforms to the city's plans for development. And then finally, we have to hold a public hearing, which is what we're here tonight for. So that's a little bit about TIF in general. So the project that we're talking about tonight is the redevelopment of the Sportland Corner site to include a new multi-tenant commercial building. So the building's proposed to be 5,500 square feet, a 5,500 square foot bank facility, as well as 1,200 square foot coffee shop space and 2,000 square feet of additional lease space, which we don't currently know the tenants for, but it's anticipated that the building will include additional office space of some sort. In addition, the developer will be undertaking the necessary demolition and site costs related to the development of the site or the redevelopment of the site. So here's the boundaries of the TIF district that's being proposed. It's the single parcel that's out there. So all the tax revenue that would be generated on this parcel is what would be captured, and all the TIF revenue is proposed to be spent on improvements incurred within this boundary aside from the administrative expenses. So in order to create a TIF district, redevelopment TIF district, certain qualifications have to be found for the site. As I mentioned, over 70% of the parcels in the TIF district have to be occupied. In this case, we have a single parcel and it's occupied by a building and parking lot. More than 50% of the buildings in that TIF district have to be deemed structurally substandard to a degree, requiring substantial renovation or clearance. In this case, the building was reviewed by the city engineer in accordance with the statute and found to be in compliance with that requirement. And structurally substandard is defined as requiring improvements to meet current building codes, which exceed 15% of the cost of constructing a new structure. So if you could bring the building into compliance for a cost less than 15% of the cost of building a new building, you wouldn't have a redevelopment district. In this case, that cost would exceed that. And that does mean that the building or the property was determined to qualify for the creation of a redevelopment TIF district. So redevelopment TIF districts allow for the use of up to 25% of the funds to be spent on public improvements or administrative costs outside the TIF district. That's the pooling I talked about. 90% of the TIF revenue must be used to reimburse the cost of correcting conditions. So in a redevelopment district, those costs include acquiring the property, demolishing buildings, clearing of land, installation of utilities, roads, sidewalks, and parking facilities. So the things that we can reimburse the developer for are costs that fall under these categories, and those are what's proposed within the TIF plan and the development agreement. And then the city can, under that 90% test, that does include the city's 10% for admin. And the redevelopment term is 25 years from the receipt of first increment. So the numbers on this are a little small, but you can see here I wanted to throw together a history of the assessed value that property has been assessed with over the last 10 years. So you can see back in the assessed 2009 for taxes payable 2010, the market value of that property was a little more than $1 million, and it was generating almost $4,200 worth of taxes to the city. You can see over the last 10 years, as that building's continued to deteriorate and become blighted, that market value has gone down significantly from $1 million for pay 2010 down to $554,000 for pay 2019. And you can see that there's a corresponding decrease in the city tax amount. I think the city tax rate must have been going up slightly during this period, which softened the decline in the tax amount. Because it does change at a lesser rate than the value, but you can see here that there's a significant decrease in the value that's occurred over that last 10 years. So with the creation of a TIF district, this value that's existing on the property would be the frozen value for the district. So that value would be maintained for the lifetime of the district as taxable market value for the city. So it would be kept in place, and the new value that's created above and beyond that and the corresponding taxes that are paid on that value above and beyond that is what would be captured. So you would be abating as part of creation of a TIF district is you would potentially be abating any future decline in market value on that site to help maintain at least the tax base that's there now and potentially offset any future decline. That's exactly what that is unknown, but I did want to point out that there has been a significant decline in the value on that site, which helps to illustrate in part that it has been deemed to be blighted and substandard. So for the TIF district assumptions themselves, we've assumed a 9,000 square foot building. We've assumed $200 per square foot from market value, which results in a post-development value of $1.8 million. So the incremental taxes generated off the growth from $554,000 to $1.8 million is the market, that increase, that $1.3 million in increased market value, and the taxes that are generated off of that are what will be captured as TIF revenue. So we're talking about the incremental growth in value, and the resulting taxes is the incremental tax revenue that we'll be capturing by the district. So the TIF projections do not assume any market value inflation. We've kept them flat in order to keep that budget low. We could have assumed a 1 or 2% market value inflation and increase the budget of the TIF district, but we wanted to be conservative and keep that number low. So the TIF eligible tax rate, this is the city, county, school district, watershed, those types of entities, is 88.386%. So this is the tax rate that would be in place for the district, and this rate's frozen. So if TIF is generated in future years and this tax rate goes up, the increase in the tax rate will not get captured as tax revenue or as TIF revenue. It'll fall outside the TIF district and come as general fund revenue if this tax rate goes up. If it goes down, the developer takes that risk. The TIF revenue will be less. If that rate goes down, the TIF revenue will be less. The developer get repaid less. So statute set up TIF in the form where the increase, if there was an increase in tax rate, the city and the county and the school district will see that benefit. If there's a lessening of that tax rate, the developer will see that consequence. And the other important thing for the city or for the school district is referendum market value taxes are not captured by TIFs. So the school district will see a benefit due to the increased market value in the site for their special levies that are in place that capture taxes on a referendum market value basis. So they will be benefiting from this property if it were to be redeveloped. So the first TIF is projected to be received in taxes payable 2021. So that would be development occurring between 2018 and 2019, construction between 2018 and 2019, assessed 2020, paid 2021. And additionally, the city would be retaining 10% of the administrative retainage. So I threw together this little pie chart to show the breakout of the annual TIF revenue. So the annual TIF revenue, the 90% of the revenue that's projected to be collected by the district and used to reimburse the developer for costs is approximately $19,749. At least that's the projection. The total annual property tax that the property will be incurring, paying down on the existing value, the new value, the state property taxes, and the referendum market value is $49,139. So a small portion, less than 50% of the property is actually eligible to be captured as tax increment revenue. So the new property tax bill on the property would be approximately $49,000, of which $19,749 would be eligible to be captured as TIF and paid back. And that tax revenue is comprised of future taxes generated by each of the taxing jurisdictions. So 28% of that revenue is school district revenue, or applicable to the school district's tax rate. 36% of that revenue is tax revenue applicable to the county's tax rate. 36% of that revenue is applicable to the city's tax rate. So if you were to compare this project and you were doing kind of the calculus of what benefit would the city realize if this project occurred outside of a TIF district and the revenue was not captured by increment, it wouldn't be $19,749 that would be new revenue to the city. It would be approximately 36% of that is the incremental growth that's applicable to the city's portion. So it's important to remember that we're capturing other tax entities' revenues as well. So when we think of, if we were comparing this to what if it happened outside and the value was, a new project was $1.8 million, it would be significantly less, or 36% of this amount that would actually be benefit to the city if this occurred outside of a TIF district. So this is the need for TIF assistance, and again, I forgot that this was as small as it was. I think that you have this, I believe, in a memo from before as well. So when we talked about how are we making the but-for finding, so how are we determining that this project needs assistance? And what commonly happens with redevelopment projects is you have barriers to investment that are present on that site that otherwise aren't present on a greenfield site. If you were looking at redeveloping this site, you would be incurring costs that you wouldn't be paying if you were looking at a vacant piece of land, say down the street or somewhere else within the city. So there's a barrier there that creates a financial reason why somebody why the market would pursue other properties. So the market's kind of like water. It's always going to the lowest level, trying to find the most value and the least amount of cost as it's looking to do projects. So in this case, there's a barrier to the investment in the property. There's a barrier in the fact that the seller sees value in the property that may not be present, but any real estate transaction requires a willing seller and a willing buyer. And sometimes you have to realize, you have to meet in the middle and come up with a market value that both parties are capable of coming up with. In this case, the seller is seeking a sales price of $775,000. A hypothetical greenfield site somewhere else in the city has on average a value of $220,000. Let me pull this up on my own. So again, you're paying for the value that the property owner sees, and the property owner also sees value in the building. A lot of times when we're faced with redevelopment TIF districts, we're seeing a building that's obsolete, a building that's going to be torn down, but the seller sees value in it. And in this case, the county sees value in it as well. The county has the property right now valued at $554,000. So again, you're seeing both parties, the county and the seller, see value in a building that's ultimately going to have to be, or likely to be, demolished by most other users given the condition of the building. So you typically have to pay for the property at a higher rate than maybe you would if there was a greenfield site. So there's a barrier there. Additionally, on this site, you have demolition costs. So in this case, we're talking about $75,000 worth of demolition costs. So you wouldn't have that on a greenfield site. As well as additional $10,000 for environmental and additional approximately $25,000 delta between site improvement costs for this site versus site improvement costs for a greenfield site. So in combination, you see that the redevelopment of this site has an increased cost of almost $622,000 that wouldn't be present on a greenfield site. Even if you were to assume the value of the property or the sale price of the property was the county number at $554,000, you're still seeing a difference between the county valuation of the property and a greenfield site of which would be $228,000. You're still seeing a difference there of $351,000. So I wanted to point that out because when we're talking about reimbursing the developer for land acquisition, we're reimbursing them for an amount of approximately $202,000, $202,500. That's this amount here. That's the amount that we'd be using to reimburse the developer for acquiring the property. That's less than the difference between what the county has it valued at and of comparable greenfield sites. So we're not, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, Tom, but just for those in the audience who may not fully know what you mean by a greenfield site, could you just, I don't know if you did explain that earlier. If you did, I missed it. But
Okay, yeah.
It's just a bare lot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just a bare
exactly.
lot.
The greenfield site's kind of the hypothetical greenfield, the bare vacant lot, the ready-to-be-developed lot, something maybe shovel-ready or the like, where there's not going to be any barrier to investment. A vacant parcel versus this parcel has significant cost differences. So we're just kind of pegging it against, when we're doing this analysis, pegging against a hypothetical. We don't have a specific site in mind, nothing in particular, but just generally, what would the barriers on this site be versus a hypothetical site within the city?
Bare lot.
Yeah, bare lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think the important thing here with the land acquisition is we're closing less, we're using land acquisition to close a portion of the delta that's the difference between the county valuation of the property and the greenfield cost. We're not even reimbursing that full difference. We're not even closing that. There's a barrier there to investment based on the county's valuation of the property, let alone what the seller is asking for. So we're not even closing this gap. So it's good to know that because we're not reimbursing the seller for having an inflated land price. We're not going up to that $775,000 and reimbursing that delta there. We're not even closing the county gap between the county number and a greenfield site. So we're not rewarding bad behavior by our property seller, if you will, by allowing that property to become blighted. We're not offsetting that. We're not even closing the gap between what the county has it valued at versus what a greenfield site is. So I think it's important for the city to know that, because sometimes cities have concerns when they're reimbursing for land acquisition that they're just allowing a developer or a property seller to inflate the value of the price. We're not even reimbursing that. We're not even reimbursing the property at the valuation that the county has on it. So I think it's good to know that we're not over-incenting the property based on the selling price of the property. So this is the development agreement terms, and we've gone over some of these, but there's been a couple changes that we made to the development agreement in response to the last meeting. So right now, the TIF revenues are capable of reimbursing the developer for $332,500 in TIF eligible redevelopment expenses on a pay-as-you-go basis. So they would get reimbursed those costs over the lifetime of the district based on 90% of the TIF revenue that's captured. The city will have no obligation to satisfy any shortfall in the event that TIF revenue is less than projected. In addition, we'll also be reimbursing the developer for interest expenses incurred on the funding of those costs at a rate of 3% annually. So the developer will be incurring those costs today. They'll be borrowing that money or using bank funds today to fund those improvements, and they're not going to get repaid back over time. So a lot of times when we're doing this and it's a private developer, they're going to be going to a bank and borrowing at a current market rate, typically 5.5%. In this case, because we're working with the bank, they're going to be utilizing funds from within the bank, I assume, and they're only seeking a reimbursement of 3% interest. So it wouldn't be unexpected if this was a different project to actually have a higher interest expense and have a higher portion of the TIF revenue going towards interest costs as opposed to the amount here, because the interest is at a below market rate of only 3%. I don't know about anybody else, but I would like to be able to borrow at 3%. So that helps ensure that the majority of the TIF revenue is going towards, or a higher portion of the TIF revenue is going towards hard costs as opposed to interest expenses. And it helps make this number, while that number is higher, the interest amount is lower. So one of the things that we did is that we changed the term of the TIF pay-go note from what was originally proposed at the last meeting. We shortened the TIF revenue period, or the repayment period of the note, down to 21 years from a maximum of 26. We left the principal amount the same, but we shortened the term, because when I talked about how we did not assume any inflation, if inflation were to occur, it would be able to pay off that note faster. So what I did is I looked at how much quicker would that pay off if we assumed a 1.5% interest rate, or inflation rate. And if we assumed a 1.5% inflation rate, that would reduce the repayment period of this amount. So what we ended up doing is we ended up tweaking the development agreement to guarantee that the repayment period is only going to be 21 years. So the developer is going to be taking on the risk that the property and tax rates are going to increase, or that the tax rates will be flat and the property value will increase at a rate of 1.5%. So if it doesn't increase at 1.5%, the district's going to end, and the pay-go obligation is going to end after 21 years. And if they don't get paid back, they don't get paid back, and that's not the city's risk. So what I did is we kept the inflation out of the budgets, we set the principal amount, but then we put the inflation assumption basically into the obligation by shortening the term. So the developer is taking on that risk, and the city is getting the guarantee that the TIF district will end early. So if the TIF district ends, if it takes the full 21 years, the property value will be back on the property tax base in 2042, and if it takes less, it'll be off the tax rates earlier, because once this pay-go obligation has been satisfied, the district has to decertify by statute. So what we ended up doing is we ended up putting that hedge into the duration of the TIF district while leaving the amount the same and allowing the city to get this property back on the tax rolls faster if you were to approve the development agreement as proposed. So the developer is taking on that risk. It does shorten the term of the TIF district, guaranteed by 5 years down to 2041, and it does result in an interest savings as well. So the amount of interest that would be incurred if it were to take the full 21 years to repay that amount is approximately $29,000 less than it had been projected if it were to occur over the full 26-year period. So the amount of interest that the developer would actually be able to receive is going to be less, because it's going to be a shorter period of time. So that does result in a savings to the city as well by shortening that term, as well as getting the property back on the tax rolls faster. So this is the TIF budget from the TIF plan. We didn't amend the TIF plan. The TIF plan just sets authority. So we left the budget there. So the budget right now for interest payments is $180,000, but the actual payments to the developer are going to be closer if everything goes as planned and it's paid off over 26 years. The actual interest payments in total would be approximately $150,000. So this is the old number, because we didn't want to go through the process of changing the TIF plan, because the TIF plan just sets authority. It doesn't require that you spend this amount. So this is the old number. The new number is approximately $150,000. It's about $30,000 less. It's $29,422 less than what's shown within the budget in the TIF plan. So this is the total budget of the TIF plan. So we're talking about, again, reimbursing the developer for the $332,500 in total redevelopment costs. Approximately, we have authority to reimburse them for up to $180,000 in interest expenses, and this is only as incurred, and it'll be calculated each year. If TIF comes in faster, that the amount of interest that's incurred will be less because of paying it off faster. Similarly, if you paid off a mortgage faster, you would incur less interest on your total mortgage payments over the life of it. So this amount will decrease. And then the city will still have the ability to capture up to $57,000 in administrative expenses, bringing the total budget to $570. So in likelihood, the total budget and the actual expenditures of the district will be less than this due to the shortened term, both on the administrative expense side as well as the interest side. So the total tax increment revenue proposed within the district is $570,518. That's over the full 26 years. Obviously, if it's a shorter term, that would be a lesser amount. So that's really everything I had. So the next steps would be hold the public hearing, which is what we're doing, taking public comment, and then if you so choose, adopt a resolution approving creation of the TIF district and the development agreement. So one thing I did, Jenny did inform me that there was a question about the resolution in the interfund loan language that's in there. So as a bit of background, the purpose of that language within the resolution is just to provide the city with authority to fund costs that they might then choose to reimburse with TIF. It's just a flexibility thing. Anytime the city wants to incur costs in advance of the creation of a TIF district, they have to adopt an interfund loan resolution. It doesn't obligate the city to utilize that at all. It just gives you the authority to do so if you were to choose. There's not really, it's included in the resolution typically just as standard practice to give you guys the maximum flexibility. Certain circumstances, it's not relevant in this case because the developer is actually going to be incurring the cost for the creation of the TIF district, but sometimes cities will choose to incur that cost. So if the city wanted to incur the cost of creating the TIF district and then reimburse themselves for those costs with future TIF revenue, that's considered an interfund loan. So by adopting that portion of the language, and you certainly have the ability to strike it if you like, you're just giving yourself the ability to incur certain costs in advance of the creation of the TIF district and then use future TIF dollars to reimburse yourself for that.
Councilman John?
Yeah.
Could you go back to the second or third slide in from the beginning? That's not it, no. There was a point in there that they had to go through the planning and zoning.
Yeah, here we are. Typically, city processes, or typically when we do this, we'll have the planning commission
Okay,
make-
well, my point was that planning and zoning did not talk about this at all. Does that invalidate the public hearing or not?
No, not at all. It's typically we'll have a planning commission adopt that and review that and adopt a resolution, but it's only a recommendation that
Okay, so it's okay then.
that the
Okay,
planning
that
commission
answers
makes
my
that
question.
finding. The city of Nisswa, and this is just our standard language, I probably should have updated it, because the city, historically, when the city has adopted these TIF districts, and they've adopted 12 prior to this, they haven't had the planning commission review that. They've let the council make that determination. So part of the resolution, one of the things that's in the resolution, part of the findings that you're going to be making by, if you were to adopt that resolution, is that as the city council, you're adopting that same finding, that the proposed development conforms to the city's comprehensive plan as a whole. So planning commissions most of the time will do that. It's really ultimately, it's a recommendation anyways to the city council, so it's ultimately...
You answered my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess any other questions for me, or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in reading through this, it talked about where if the TIF district causes more traffic, that the county could have the city pay for the road reconstruction or any road. And they are planning on redoing that intersection. Is there any chance that the county can then require the city to pay for road reconstruction at that intersection on County Road 13?
Yeah, there's limited circumstances within which counties can do that, and technically, they have 45 days from when they get notified of the TIF district to do that, and I think we've actually notified them, I think that was almost more than 45 days ago. If not, it's been very close. So they would have likely
So they
already...
have to do that within that 45 days?
Yeah, they have to
And we've
notify
already
the city.
Contacted them of, it's not from when we adopted, it's from
Yeah,
when we
it's
notified.
not an indefinite blank check, and then more importantly, and I think it's 10 years, they can only capture tax increment revenue for projects if those projects are outside of their 10-year CIP. So if they're planning on improving the property or that road right now, and it's already within their 10-year CIP, they're already to do that anyways. The legislature doesn't want them to just go ahead and capture tax increment revenue for projects that they were already intending to do. It's only in circumstances where you have very transformative projects that weren't on anybody's horizon and are going to cause significant traffic changes. So when we helped the city of Shakopee do the Amazon project, that was not intended, in a real estate area, in an industrial area that was not intended to see that level of traffic increase on anybody's radar anytime soon. So in that case, the county's actually capturing almost 100% of the tax increment revenue to pay for new roadways related to that project. And that was what the entirety of that tax increment revenue ended up going for. But it was a project that wasn't on anybody's radar, was not within the 10-year plan.
That answers that.
Yep.
Do you have anything else, Tom? Are you ready for questions?
I was ready for questions, yeah.
I want to go back to the interfund loan that you talked about.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the agreement on page 4, line 9, that talks about the advance, the loan money for an interfunding loan. What bothers me is 9A, because I think that this council wants to do a pay-as-you-go, and 9A says, "The city hereby authorizes the advance of up to $570,518 from the general fund to pay for qualified costs." That bothers me, and that we're approving that. I would assume that we could eliminate item 9 in its entirety, since we're going to do a pay-as-you-go. We don't need that at all, correct?
Yeah, you don't need it at all, and it's not intended to be
So we'd be safe in eliminating section 9 completely on a pay-as-you-go system.
Certainly, or you could, if you wanted to change it to a lesser amount, if you wanted to do $10,000 and
No,
yourself.
I don't think,
any
personally,
flex.
I don't want to go out and borrow money for something that may or may not occur.
Certainly, and
So,
you can
okay,
certainly,
so we can eliminate 9 if we want to.
yes, you can.
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you.
So on number 9, then, the only person, the only entity that can institute or start something up under item 9 is the city. We would have to want to do an interfund loan.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody
You would-
else involved in this TIF district can do it, just us.
No, it's exactly, and it's not meant to substitute or replace the pay-as-you-go note by any stretch. It's just it's a flexibility thing, and it's really in relation to some arcane rules that the Office of the State Auditor has been really strict on enforcing lately in terms of when did cities incur costs and were they technically done under an interfund loan resolution or not. It's not intended to replace the pay-as-you-go note by any stretches, and it only authorizes up to that amount if the city were to so choose to do so. You wouldn't be obligating yourself to do anything under the resolution as adopted or as proposed or drafted.
Any other questions? Council at this point? Hearing none, I'd like to invite public comment. Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone here that would have some thoughts they'd like to share? Please step up to the mic and give your name and address for the records, please.
Dawn Music, M-U-S-I-C-K, 3750 West Linden Boulevard. TIF assistance is not something I'm against. I think it's a great tool used properly. But my question on this project is if this is a project that the city, it fills a need for the city. If you're going to invest this kind of money, is a bank and a coffee shop what we need so desperately to invest in? We have 3 coffee shops and a number of banks, and I just question whether this particular project warrants this kind of investment. That's, yes, the corner is kind of blighted, but the price at some point will come down and someone will buy that property and develop it. I get it that we don't want to reward bad behavior, and that's what it feels like to me a little bit as well. That's just my thoughts on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jim Crafton, president of Franzen Bank, right in that same area in Smiley Road. I really don't want to be speaking up here. The fact that The city is looking at subsidizing a competitor in a development project is what I'm opposed to, but I'm also looking at it from the fact standpoint as far as utilizing TIF. TIF is typically used for public improvements. In this case, they've made a case for a blighted property. I would say that the blighted property is an ill-maintained property, which the city has the ability to enforce to be maintained under their ordinance, and as a gap financing tool for this. As far as encouraging the development, the developer has said that if they can't develop in this spot, they still want to be in Nisswa. So the development will still occur. So the but-for is a question there. The but-for this property may be, but somebody could very well come along and see the total value for this property and see a use for this property that would justify the expense that's being paid for it. The eligible costs that are being looked at, if this was, public costs, we talked about the changes to the intersection. There certainly is a need for changes to the intersection that may be caused by additional traffic in this area as well. And at this point, the taxes on this property will be partially released to go back to the developer on it, even though that they would benefit from those improvements. Even though if you look at the presentation, it looks like there is not an expense to the city or to any of the other taxpayers. But any time that you give up revenue from another source, it has to come from someplace else. And so that revenue needs to come from someplace else. As far as the bank developing the property, I have no qualms with them developing the property. I just don't see the city adding to providing subsidy for that property. The assessed value that was compared there utilized the $554,000 as compared to a greenfield site. The greenfield site would be a bare piece of property. The assessed site does have some value for those improvements. And I know there's a breakdown in the site value versus improvement values that are in the estimated tax value. I don't know what those are, and they weren't included in the presentation. But to compare it to a regular greenfield site is a little bit different when you've got one of the best sites for retail development on that corner at Sportland Corners compared to another greenfield site is not a direct comparison. There is some value to the location. And in real estate, location is an immense value. I am standing up here as a competitor, and I realize that that is self-serving. I have been a resident of Nisswa in the past and have served 4 years on the planning and zoning with Nisswa. At that time, TIF requests did go through planning and zoning. I normally do not have qualms with TIF. I'm Director Emeritus for Brainerd Lakes Area Economic Development Corporation as well. And so development is what I stand for, what I've worked at very hard. If you look at the comprehensive plan of Nisswa, the plan for Nisswa has been focused on housing development and focused on the industry of tourism. We've looked at industrial development in the past, and that has not been a direction that has been sought by the city. And so, does this fit with the plan of the city as far as what the sources of revenue should be used for? I respect the wisdom of the council and just wanted to make the comments in regard to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else that would have some thoughts they would like to share? BJ?
Mayor and council, my name is Patrick Smith, and I am with American National Bank. And first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for walking down this road with us. And I understand all the comments. I understand Jim's comments. I'm sure those are things that you're all wrestling with as well. Quite frankly, if this was an easy site to develop, it would have been developed a long time ago. From my perspective, the most important thing I want to do tonight is let you know that I do understand this is a difficult decision. And our goal is first and foremost to come into town and bring a highly useful, highly productive community bank. A community bank that works in the community, lends in the community, and is part of the community. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is we really, 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 really want to do it in this location. But there is no way that we can do it in this location without the pursuit of tax increment financing. So long story short, essentially the board of directors told me, don't go after this site. It's a beautiful site, but it's just way too expensive. After much discussion, they gave me the authority to go ahead and try and pursue this site, and that's exactly what I did. I got the realtors to agree to let me to negotiate directly with the seller, and I spent a lot of time on the phone with the seller working to get to a number that I felt was the absolute bottom number. That bottom number is still the number that you're looking at. It's $775,000. It's a lot lower than list price. It's a lot lower than any number she's looked at previously, but it's still a really big number. And at the end of the day, not only I, but the board of directors of the bank have the obligation of being financially prudent. And so for us to go forward with this location, this is the only way we can do it. And so then we stepped back and we said, okay, so this location is worthy of more than just a bank. So we started reaching out to other successful businesses in the community, and one of the individuals, unfortunately Mike was willing to show up tonight. Mike French showed a very strong interest, so we started trying to design our building in a way where we could incorporate other successful businesses into the community and make this more than just a bank, make it worthy of the location itself. So that's where we're at tonight. I respect Jim. I respect what he just had to say. He has every right to make those comments. I think at times, I'm sure he's never done this in a public forum against any other TIF transaction, but sometimes where you sit is where you stand. And in my opinion, that might be the case tonight. I guess I'll leave it at that. I would like to ask Mike if he'd be willing to come up and just share a few words about what he's proposing for the project. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike French. I'm Stonehouse Coffee and Roastery in Nisswa, and we have a small one in Baxter in conjunction with another bank. I was honored to have PJ come to me and ask us to be part of his project. I've been approached several times on that corner by people that wanted me to take a big chunk of that loan. Well, I don't run a business that can actually go in and hand out $500,000 to purchase a piece of property. We have a small, family-run coffee business. We're quite successful, and we're known. You know, we send coffee all over the U.S. and well-respected and, within the community. And but this is like the third time somebody's come to me about that. The two other times it failed, and I learned in the coffee shop, you don't talk about religion or politics. And I don't want to be on either side of that, but to me it's a good idea. I know some people wonder about the use of TIF funds for things that aren't perhaps more humanitarian, but we employ right now 24 kids, people. In our peak, sometimes it gets to be more. So we give back to the community. We buy locally. We spend our money here. We've been here since 1983. Not in Nisswa proper, but a few miles out. So we're very familiar with the community. I think it's an opportunity. I am hoping that people see that side of it. But again, I just want to thank you for the chance and thank PJ for the chance. I think we'd be a good addition because we do have a huge group, and that's a whole demographic that doesn't come to Nisswa down there. So I was looking at it as a business standpoint. All those people, I was here when the Portland Corner used to be, before they built this last building, when it was a house and a gas station, and this restaurant was just thriving. And it just used to always stop up there. But I think there's opportunity financially, and I think the city will definitely be able to recover its investment. I think it's a good choice. It'll beautify and it'll bring something really neat to that corner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Matt Hansen, 3750 West Linden. I have similar thoughts as my wife does in regards to the proper use of this TIF financing. I'm not opposed to TIF. I believe that somewhere along the line, the current owner of the building allowed tenants to leave without replenishing with tenants, and the building deteriorated. I look at the city and wonder, is it okay for a business owner to just let their business sit and slowly deteriorate in front of their eyes and decrease in value and do nothing? You have rules about how buildings to appear. I know you have a lot of signs taken down that you didn't like the looks of signs, but I know taking buildings down or having owners keep them up to a standard is also, I think, in your purview to do. Another bank, coffee shop, again, just seems to be going in the wrong direction. The bank would be, I assume, financing their own loan, yet 3% of that interest is going to be given back to them. So how much is their actual out-of-pocket interest expense? I see a lot, and there were a number of other factors that I can't recall exactly, but I got the feeling that the bank could be coming out pretty darn good on this investment. They have the chance of getting a piece of property that is worth a lot of money, a great location, and is being funded quite substantially by the city of Nisswa, and the taxpayers of the city of Nisswa are incurring some cost of that. So I really think that the council should also be financially prudent in determining what's best in the long term. If they choose to build another bank, well, they're going to build a bank worth a lot of money there too, and you will get full property taxes on that property. The owner of the existing property at some point, I think, should be pressured on improving the property, come to realistic terms that it's not worth what they want it to be. It's just not there. I don't know that there will be a lot of people that will want to come along and buy for that amount of money, but how long does this person want to sit on that piece of property and watch it literally collapse? And that's what you would be allowing this person to do, is make a pretty good profit by selling it, by you kicking in a bunch of money to make the deal go, which I think will become very profitable for those investing. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else? Now's the time to share thoughts.
Good evening. My name is Bob Sefko. I work with PJ Smith. I really hadn't intended to come up here, but the point that I'd like to make in kind of summary from the bank's point of view is that we're prepared to go ahead with this project. We're prepared to do it exactly as it's laid out for you. And tomorrow morning, if you approve it, we'll get going on all of the things that we need to do. In order for us to do that, TIF is essential. PJ said it. I would reiterate that if the TIF is not available, this project does not go forward. So as I see it, tonight, your job is to look at what's in the best interest of the city. And really, you've got a couple of alternatives. Alternative number one is to say no, which you have the right to do. And if you say no, then, past is prologue, and what is the future going to have? We've had some suppositions that things will change. There will be new interest, new people will come along. We don't know any of those things because the future is unpredictable. What you do know, and that's the second alternative, you vote in favor of this, is that there is a real live project, a project that will allow you to maintain the same level of tax base as you currently have, only shares the revenue on the increment, and any inflation or any increase over that would simply accelerate the time for repayment. So I think the question is, do you vote for the status quo and hope that the future is something different than the past, or do you go forward with a real live project with a developer who has the ability to complete the project? One of the things that I heard was a bank doesn't need this kind of thing. We should save this kind of thing for people who really need it. Well, think about it. Wouldn't you prefer to have a developer that has the wherewithal to actually complete the project, that has the financial strength to do exactly what we say we're going to do, than a developer who's in need of this from the standpoint that the project is shaky? Seems to me you should opt in favor of someone that has the ability to do what they say and to complete the project. So I think the choice is really quite simple. Do you vote for the status quo, or do you vote for a project that is on your desk right now that can be implemented? It's very simple. And I will tell you this, that in terms of the but-for test, if the increment is not approved, then we simply will not do the project that you see.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay.
Mayor Heidman, if I could, the council also received a letter that I put a copy in front of your spaces this evening. I just wanted to read into the record, just from a public hearing perspective. It's from the owner of Steamboat Properties, LLC, and Remax Lakes Area Realty, from Patrick Wybush, I believe. I'm writing in support of American National Bank's proposed development of Sportland Corner and the use of tax increment financing as a tool to assist in redeveloping this property. I own the property immediately north of the Sportland location and consider the site an eyesore and an impairment to both my property and the greater Nisswa business community. It is also worth noting that this site currently drains onto my property, creating moisture and drainage issues that need to be resolved. The site has sat vacant for far too long, and the current structure cannot be rehabilitated to a useful purpose. Therefore, I see TIF as a means to assist in redeveloping this property. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. Council, we'll close the public comment. Council discussion?
Well, I'll put my foot out. I don't think there's anybody up here that would not like to see that corner developed and something nice going in other than what we see today. I don't think anybody here would be against that. I echo some of the concerns that some of the people have already expressed out there. This is $570,000. As one senator from Illinois used to say, talk about $1 million here and $1 million there, pretty soon you're talking real money. $570,000 is the share for us, for the school district, and the county. So it's not just us that's involved in this. There was some talk about using this money because it's government funds. It's not government funds, it's taxpayer funds. If we use the money, we're using taxpayer funds. And the bank is, I assume, financially stable, but I'm assuming that even they will have to go out and, on an interagency basis, borrow the money from other banks to get this done, and that's at 3%, so we're actually paying part of their development costs there. We have the engineer's findings that we can act on later if we choose, but I guess it comes down to a pretty simple choice for me. Are we willing to spend $570,000 of taxpayer money over a period of 20 years to develop the site or not? I'd like to say yes to that, but I'm thinking right now, no. I don't think I want to pay $570,000 to go ahead on this project. I appreciate the fact that the bank will, as said, it's going to build someplace in Nisswa if this doesn't go through. I understand there's even discussions with another entity about entering into maybe a purchase of another structure in Nisswa and moving in and rehabilitating that. So there are options there. My vote on this would be no, for the reasons I've talked about. It's taxpayer money. I think we have to be very careful when we're using taxpayer money. Not to say that TIF isn't good for other projects, and TIF in the right spot is okay, but I don't think it's okay in this case. That's my feeling.
Thank you, Don.
Well, of course, the risk of, I understand what you said, and I share all those same concerns. The risk, of course, is to do nothing means a continued decrease in revenue. The seller has shown zero interest in being realistic as to what the value of that property is. And it continues to get worse and worse every year. So to just assume somebody at some point will come along and buy it, to assume at some point the seller will come to reason and understand that the value is completely out of whack, I don't think we can make that assumption. The last 10 years or however long it sat there shows the seller is unwilling to be realistic about the value. So I've really struggled with this. I think it's an opportunity to freeze our revenue, get rid of an eyesore. So I see two benefits there. Another option that I don't even know what the legalities would be of it, but I think at some point condemnation should be talked about if we do nothing. So I'm leaning more towards yes than no.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Others?
Yeah, I guess I've struggled more with this decision than probably any decision I've made. I think that it is absolutely a proper and appropriate use of the TIF program and what it's designed for. I think that the seller has demonstrated that they don't need the money, whatever reason that they've demonstrated that they're not going to be negotiable on it, and really comes down to betting, well, if the property sits another 5 years, I think we made the wrong decision, or more, obviously, after that every year. If that goes, if we say no and it goes, then we made the right decision, and that's what it comes down to. Honestly, I don't have a problem with the bank going in there. I think to have an entity in there that can reinvest back in the community, I think is a good thing. And have a locally owned bank, which I know banks sell quite frequently, but to have something that's local, that has proven to reinvest, that part I really don't have a problem with. Where I struggle the most is the total cost. And where I struggle, and I certainly understand it, but where I've really gone back and forth is the interest, and where the interest brings the total to. If we were talking, just the 300,000, but that's where I struggle, is the cost is too great. When I first, kind of figured out Nisswa was 36%, I thought, but you can't look at it that way. You got to look at the total tax burden on everybody and everyone. So I don't know. I've really, really, really struggled with this. I've been all over the board, but I still am kind of on the fence. I'm probably leaning towards no because of the total cost. And I think at least the way the economy's going, that we may get there to have somebody buy it. But again, in 5 years, if not, I would think we made the wrong decision. I saw you shaking your head no on that, but I mean, the value's definitely going down. That's been demonstrated. That's been proven that the value of that property is going down, and the building's only going to get worse. And I don't know. We've talked about going after the owner, but that brings costs of its own. Now we get lawyer fees, and that can be very expensive. And from what I've seen with planning and zoning and trying to get people in compliance, it's not just the city can tell them to do it and they have to do it. It does not work that way. And so I think that's a long road in itself to try to bring compliance there. So, but it's, like I said, it's a tough decision.
It is. I struggled with it myself, many of the same issues. It's the cost. It's the cost of the taxpayers. It's the whole, it's not our money. At the same token, one of the problems the city's had for a number of years is a lack of economic development, and it has to change. And the comment that I learned or was told from an individual who's had direct contact with the owner is she's wrote it in, that's what it is, and she's not going to change her mind, and she doesn't need to because she doesn't need the money. So that becomes our eyesore, our problem. And to Ross's point, you can send letters and you can start processes, but it costs money. And, is the building of light? Yeah. Is it completely 100% unrehabilitable? No. It could be done. Anything could be done with it if you wanted to, but it's a 1980s design that doesn't flow for much of anything anymore. From the economic development standpoint, there's been a lot of people in a lot of areas around the city of Nisswa that have had opportunities according to the comp plans and past comp plans to build housing and do those kinds of things. They haven't done it. They've tried in some cases, it just hasn't gone. There's a lot of people that live around here that work at employers. They can't afford a lake home, but it would be nice to have affordable housing around. Yep, but it would also be nice to have more jobs in town that are, could support families as well. And those families would have kids that would go to our school, and we want to keep that here. So I've leaned both ways on it, honestly. But at some point in time, we have to let people know that Nisswa is open for business. And for everyone that has a business or that is a taxpayer here, we all, when it came to the issue of roads, we're all in it together. We didn't want assessments. We want to stick together. We want to work at it as a team and as a whole community. And I'm kind of leaning that direction on this right now. I don't like the number, but I like what that corner looks like even less. So I'll be honest, I haven't completely made up my mind yet. Coming down to the wire, but I haven't completely made up my mind yet. But we have to let people know that Nisswa is open for business.
The cost, yes, it's a big number, but the cost of doing nothing adds up to a big number over time too,
Yes, it does.
as that tax revenue continues to decrease.
Well, I have some thoughts that I want to share. And first of all, I'll just start out by saying it's not really a difficult decision for me. I've probably heard from about 36 citizens, close to that number, maybe more, maybe less. Not one is in favor of TIF financing for that location. I think with that property, if the city has any problem there, it is that we may not be enforcing our planning and zoning regulations like we should. I do believe that in our planning and zoning there is it does allow for the city to actually do the repairs, and if the owner does not choose to keep the place up, the city can do the work and assess it to the property taxes and get it done and move forward. It is an eyesore, there's no doubt about it. The people that I've heard from that have contacted me or stopped me on the street or whatever the case may be, as I said, none were in favor of the TIF. All would like to see it cleaned up. And I think we have the planning and zoning regulations to do that. There was mention of a need. Does the city need, is there a need to give TIF to any business there? And especially for what's being proposed, pretty much that whole group didn't feel there was a need to do so. And along that line, the but-for test doesn't really add up. I mean, if we were talking about a medical clinic or something that was, and I'm not proposing a medical clinic, but if there was a project that came to the community that was a good fit and they needed money and there was a true need in the community for it, that would be potentially a good use for TIF money. There's been comments among that group about there's plenty of available land where the city would not have to give out TIF money. It's not the best use of the land, which I fully believe that if a person buys a piece of property and there's no government aid or assistance, that they have the right to do whatever they want with that piece of property, providing it meets the ordinances of the city. But if the city is looking to be involved with TIF money, then I think the city does have the right and the authority to think about whether it's the best use of the land before granting money. Also, people brought up there's no real new jobs that are going to come because of that. Most of the jobs are kind of in the area already, and whether somebody drives 1 mile to work or 12 miles to work, their belief is there's really not going to be a new economic boom because of it. The thought that, I think something that we're not, and this is my logic here, something that I don't think that has been brought up or brought into account is that from 2008, which was the start of the economic recession, all properties have went down substantially in value. So the fact that this property went down in value during that same period of time has some bearing on that. Not all, but some bearing on that.
Most have come back, though.
Right.
And she has lowered from her original where she started. She has brought down the sale price of the property.
Right.
With that.
But it's obviously still more than what the average person, the average business is willing to bear. So then we're looking at, in a way, subsidizing. I would love to go out and find a piece of property to buy and then want to sell it for way more than it's worth and have a potential buyer say, well, that's ridiculous, but I'll go see if I can get some financing, some TIF financing to help me make it work. That doesn't, I think the city can, with its current zoning regulations, clean up the property so that it is a nicer looking dead piece of property. So that pretty well that covers the feedback that I got from the community. So when I say it's not a hard decision for me. It's based on hearing from 36 people who've said there wasn't one that said it was a good idea. Most thought it was, why in the heck would you even go down the road? So that's my feedback.
So a couple of thoughts there. So if we incurred the cost to go clean it up, whatever that number is, $100,000, and we can turn around and have it reassessed or have it part of their taxes. Well, are we going to recoup that $100,000 through taxes? Again, it would all depend on when it sells. She's still going to have a property that she probably thinks is overvalued. Maybe she thinks that adds value to it. So we're back at square one.
But in my way of thinking, the concern that the citizens have that I'm hearing when it comes to what is there currently is just that it's not maintained. And so I'm not so sure that some paint and getting rid of some weeds is going to cost $100,000. But that would be a planning and zoning issue.
Yeah.
My question would be to Tom, our lawyer, how easy is it to do, just for us to step in and do it and bill her? Is what essentially what we're doing.
Not easy. Your ordinances are one thing, but any process to force a change at that site, nuisance abatement would be relying on a statutory process that is a court process. And I heard the word condemnation get brought up too.
Tom, can you use your microphone, please? Sorry.
I heard the word condemnation get brought up too, which would also be a statutory process and a real can of worms if the city were to get into that. So there is no magic fix with our ordinances to make that place look like it should and there is no easy way to go in there and fix it and assess it. There's a contestable court process that is utilized for that, and you can expect that would be, I would suspicion that would be hotly contested. And so it isn't such an easy thing to say that an easy alternative here is to go in there and fix it and assess it. It just isn't that easy. What that would cost, what the debate would be, what the contest would be, I don't know, but you have to plan for the worst were you to take that route, and that's not an easy route.
Gary did make the point that we do have the ability. We have now in hand an engineer's report and findings on the structure itself. That's step one before, as you go to a court. Court is very reluctant to have somebody come in and dismantle somebody's home or business without a proper hearing, and the attorney here is right. It would take a while, but we have the first step already done here. That's another question after we've determined what we're going to do on the tax increment financing. If we're not going to do that, then we can go to the engineer's finding and decide what we want to do, if we want to do it. That's a different question.
Thank you, Don. Any other discussion?
Just, I guess, one other comment. I just was jotting some
No,
notes
please.
on concerns you brought up. As far as jobs, I think it definitely would create some new jobs. The bank isn't going to just take people from Pequot and Baxter and bring them in. There's going to be new hiring. I'm sure for the coffee shop, they're not going to just shuffle people over there. There will be new hiring. Any business that goes there, it's not like it's going to be some big industrial site that'll magically create 200 jobs. It's going to be, my guess, I don't know, 20 to 50, 40 people job site, no matter what business it is. If it's retail, maybe it would be even smaller than that. So I don't know that really, at least in my mind anyway, that piece of it doesn't really come into play. I think no matter what ends up there, I think it would create some jobs, and it would all be about the same number of jobs.
And I think the increase, what we're seeing that we would lose per year in taxes, you flip to the other side, we're already losing that per year as it sits there in the state that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, you gotta, to say this was an easy decision, I think I just didn't find it an easy decision, because you have this, you gotta look down the road, for one thing, there's, more than 13 or whatever, how many people you said in Nisswa. It's not by any stretch of imagination, but we have to look down the road at the numbers and what makes sense based on the numbers to the city and where that falls in. Because again, if it, another 5 years, that's a pretty big number that we're losing every year.
Yeah.
Plus now, if we start putting court fees in there to start down that road, we have that in there, where we do have someone here who has the wherewithal to do it. That's the other thing, is you get, for one thing, there's been a lot of people who have ran at this property and haven't made it. There's nothing to say we can't do this a different time and then the financing falls short or whatever. We have somebody who does have this ability to do this and to make this happen. So again,
only with the use of taxpayers' dollars. That's where the
I
difference is.
I get that, but just
that's where the difference
you got to
is.
look down the road and see what we're also losing at this point in revenue.
I'd like to respond to that. So let's say the building sits empty for 6 more years, the value drops, we lose $1,000 a year or $1,500 a year in taxes, additionally to where it's assessed at now. So we lose $5,000 to $10,000. In my way of thinking, I don't see that as a hindrance to letting the owner ask what they want to ask and find somebody who's willing to pay what they're asking or negotiate a deal. The dollars are small. They really are. And if somebody comes along in 3 months or in 6 years and does something with the property, the value is going to increase 2 to 3 or 4 fold which then will more than make up for a short-term loss of the property devaluing. If the city can, if the...
It's 2 to 3 fold though? We don't know that.
Well, from 700 and, I mean, from what, what's it, it's based at 550,000 roughly now. It's certainly going to be $1.5 million or more.
Are you sure? Last
Yeah.
10 years, it went from $1 million to $5 million.
That's because it's sat empty. If somebody redevelops that property...
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
If it's
I'm
re-
sorry, I
yeah.
misunderstood you. I thought,
No, if it's redeveloped.
Got
If
it.
somebody comes along in 3 months or in 5 years, redevelops it, now it's going to be worth
Yeah.
$1.5 million to 2 or, I mean, I'd hate
Yeah.
to say higher, but anything's possible.
yeah,
well-
I'm sorry.
That's
I
where
thought
I'm
you
at.
meant if it stayed as is.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we can continue to talk about this for another half hour or hour if you want to, but I think we need to get off the time here. I'll make a motion that the City Council, City of Nisswa denies for cause the proposed tax increment financing district number 1-13 as presented.
Is there a second to that? I'll second it. Discussion?
I do know that there has been talk of additional jobs, it's not going to be, like you said, it's not an industrial complex. But when we look at the jobs that will come in and the opportunities that will come in there, everything's a start. Where does it go from there? So just keep that in mind. I don't know that jobs necessarily is a fair.
Well, I mean, when I brought that up, those are comments from citizens.
Yeah, no, I know.
You know?
Yeah, I
I mean, I think the real issues that we have to look at is one is, if the city wants to move forward with TIF financing, is it the, say, highest and best use of the land? Is there a need for this sort of use of the land? I mean, I think those are two huge criterias that we need to look at. You know, people can have their views of, you know, do they want an ice cream store, or do they want a car dealership, or do they want a bank? You know, I think what we need to look at, is it the highest and best use?
We have a motion in a second. We've talked about this. I'd call the question.
Okay?
And Mayor Heidemann, if I could, we do need a roll call vote.
Yes, we will. So we'll start down at this end.
On the motion, yes.
Nay.
Yes.
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails.
So I would, at this point, make a motion to approve the proposed tax increment financing district number 1-13 as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Chair, the questions that are being said, just because I voted no doesn't mean I'm interested in because it's going on. Are we going to eliminate on page 4 of the resolution here, all of the information on the interfund loan goes from 9A, B, C, D, E, and F, because we wanted to go for a pay-as-you-go,
Eliminate section 9, basically.
all of section 9. Then a second question is, there was a suggestion by the applicant that there was going to be 5,500 lease space to the bank, 1,200 for a coffee shop, and 2,000 for additional. If we want to hold them to that, we should include that in the motion for as a placeholder, those numbers. Otherwise, they disappear. They can do anything they want. So if you want extra space, you should include the numbers. There's a memorandum from Springstead with those numbers in them. Am I correct?
You're correct that there's a memo,
Good.
but we probably should hear from Tom Denaway about both of those points, including whether or not that can be part of
The
that can
motion?
be part of the predicate to the motion. And also, I'm interested in hearing about the question about striking those pieces of the resolution, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. On the resolution, I think you would probably, and I'm not a Robert's Rules of Order expert, but would you make a motion to approve the resolution and then amendment to the resolution as part of that motion? You can certainly strike the language or make a motion to approve the resolution with that language struck as, what I guess would be probably the language. On the development agreement piece, I'm not the city's TIF attorney. That is Mary Upwald, Briggs & Morgan. She drafted it. We did discuss this. The development agreement does include a definition of the project as proposed as 5,500 square feet, 1,200 for the bank, 1,200 for the coffee shop, 2,000 square feet for additional lease space. It is described within the development agreement as such, and it does require the developer to construct the project as such, but additional language could be added to the development agreement as you saw fit, either tonight or modified to come back at a later date to strengthen that language further if you saw fit.
No.
But it is incorporated within the definition of the project.
If it's incorporated, then we probably don't need to do it. I wanted to make sure we didn't overlook that and have the opportunity evaporate in front of us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a very fair point.
So I would amend my motion to eliminate the totality of Section 9 referring to the interfund loan.
I'll amend my second.
Any discussion on the motion and the change? We'll do a roll call vote again. Don, we'll start down at your end.
No?
Yes.
No.
Yes?
Before I vote, I just want to make one comment. I share everyone's opinion of the amount of money that's being spent. I have a different opinion at TIF, but I'll save my opinion for myself. If we don't use it, somebody else does. That's the whole problem when it was let out of the bag in the 80s. I've never been a fan of it, and I don't like the numbers, but we need to let people know that businesses, especially that want to come in and along 371 in Nisswa, that we're open for business, so I vote yes.
Motion carries 3-2.
Is there anything else we need to do?
No, there's not. The resolution approves all of the changes presented.
Very good. Thank you. So next on the agenda this evening is item E2, which is Strong Nisswa event request to conduct an 1K race on August 1st, 2018. August 1st, 2018.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Second by Johnson. Discussion? Any discussion on the Strong Nisswa event? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Are you running in it, Fred?
Huh?
Are you running in it, Mr. Mayor?
I'm running my bicycle. Item E3, letter from Alan and Janice Grindy, sanitary sewer backup request. Need to take some action on that. Jenny, you want to just give an quick oversight on that for us?
I sure can. Thank you. You have a letter in your packet regarding a sewer backup into the Grindy household this past spring. Mr. and Mrs. Grindy are here tonight. If they would like to speak to the council, you're more than welcome to. But the information is in your packet as far as the details and the impact on their home that has occurred. I have shared this information with Tom Pearson as well as far as if we need to get his advice or on process and things like that. But the request before you tonight is that their repairs to their home came at a cost of $37,261.58. They are seeking consideration for the city to reimburse them for that cost. The League of Minnesota Cities is our insurance provider, and the league did their research, analysis, review, discussion with city staff and the Grindy's to get the history and everything that occurred. They came to a preliminary denial of the claim request. I spoke with Mrs. Grindy a few more times, and she presented new information that I suggested that she forward back to the league and to her insurance company. She did that, and there was some more vetting of information, and the league followed up with me to say that they are still going to recommend denial of the claim, and that the adjuster did also confirm that position with her superiors to make sure that she was reviewing the information accurately based on the location of the blind breaks and things like that. It was no fault of the cities, and that's why they denied the claim payment from the league. And so at this time, I advised Mrs. Grindy that she could bring the request forward to the city council. That would be her next step in if she wanted to pursue further action on this item.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Mr. Mayor, question?
Yes.
Question for Tom. I'm looking at the letter from the league, and it says their investigation has determined that the break was likely a result of stress to the pipe caused by the freezing and thawing of the ground around the pipe. Isn't that thing buried below the frost line, so it shouldn't have freezing and thawing on it in the first place?
The pipe is approximately 8 feet underground inside of a manhole where it broke. Unfortunately, this winter we had an extreme.
Tom, hold on a second. I couldn't hear what you said there for a second. It's 8 to 9 feet below the ground, and what?
It's inside of the manhole of their step station.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, if you could, talk in the mic a little more, it's hard to hear you.
Yeah, so anyway, this past winter was an extremely cold winter without a lot of snow, at least to begin with. And so the frost levels went down beyond 8 feet in some cases. And unfortunately, this is one of those cases. And so that pipe burst due to frost, we believe.
Were there any other of our pipes in the area that had the same problem?
No, this was the only burst pipe we had this year.
So when the pipe breaks, then that caused it then to backflow? Or
what happens is the Grindy sewer pumps into our sewer main that runs on Lower Roy Lake Road. That is the line coming from our main lift station, which has a great deal of flow through it. Normally, if the pipe was intact, there's a check valve that would prevent the backflow. As soon as the pipe breaks, any flow that comes in, there's nothing to stop it now.
Oh.
So what you rely on then is a high water alarm, alerting someone that there's a problem.
So they've got basically a sump. They've got that lifts from the basement to get it out.
Well, what it is their home, I believe, runs by gravity into our step station tank. Inside that step station tank, there's a pump that lifts it up, pushes it into our force main.
So is that the lift station, our lift station, or?
The step station, we maintain them, yes.
Yeah. And that's where the breakage occurred?
This is where the break occurred, yes.
Okay.
And because the break occurred after the valve, the check valve, it pumped.
Yeah, it defeated the check valve inside the tank.
Did the league actually come out and look at it, or just review the documents?
I believe they probably had photos from my staff. I don't know that they came out to look at it. Maybe Grindy's have some information on that. They didn't contact me.
It was kind of stated that the league is recommending, I don't know if I heard that right, so I'm asking for clarification, recommending that we decline it, or they are,
The leak
As our
has,
insurance carrier, they're declining it, so if we were to go forward with it, we would be paying it ourselves.
correct.
They denied.
That's what I thought. I just-
Yep, no,
They-
it's good
That's-
clarification.
They
That
denied
makes
the
the most
claim.
sense.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
they also say in here, I do not believe the city is responsible for damages. Oh,
Would you like to, you can certainly make a comment.
For short people.
A lot of counselors for question who didn't understand what we went through. A neighbor called and said our alarm went off. They called the city, they came and pumped the tank. We are not there from November till April, so there shouldn't have been anything to pump. There shouldn't have been any activity at all. We did not know that. It just happened. They called, they pumped it. Then on Sunday, this was on a Friday, then on a Sunday morning, noon, our neighbor on the other side called and said, Jan, the alarm is going off. We don't know what to do. So then I immediately called on this sewer number, and there was no answer. Then I called a second number, and they responded, and I said that they had, the neighbor had turned the volume down a little bit because it was so loud, but they went out right away. And he called me back and said, we pumped both tanks. And I said, well, should we come up? No problem. The tanks are pumped. Well, we couldn't sleep that night. We got up at 4:30 in the morning, headed up here to check on what was going on. We got to Brainerd, and they called and said, we've got trouble. It's coming out your windows and your door of your rock out. Why wasn't this shut off? And the answer was, the frost was deep, they couldn't get to it, so they thought they had time to do it Monday morning, but it was too late. If our cabin wasn't important to us, I would walk away. But we love this community. We just bought 3 acres across the road to build a new home and retire up here and use the cabin for the children when they come up. It would be easy to walk away, but there's a black mark against my cabin now because I've had that incident. I don't blame the city. I blame the insurance company for not backing you up by saying they were not negligent. You were not negligent. It was an accident that I became a victim of. We had more expenses than I have listed there, but I didn't think that was trivial. It was the basic things that need to be replaced. I thank you for your time.
If I could ask a question, and I assume I know the answer, but did you pursue through your own homeowners and were denied also, or have you not pursued that?
We called them immediately, and I don't have coverage for sewer.
Yeah, I know that's
That's
usually the case.
But we
unless-
now have, we called Allstate, and they now have a $25,000 coverage, and we've taken that now. And now we have gone through People's Security, and they're going to adapt a security thing. Okay. They're just in the process of getting a sensor on there, which will be a backup, which is what we really want, is a backup. So I've asked Mike from the sewer whatever his name is, Mike, and he said he would gladly come in when we're going to leave in the winter and shut off the shut-off. And he would turn it on again in the spring when I call him and turn it back on so nothing can come back through. So we're doing all that we can so it doesn't happen again. But in the meantime, we've really had a mess. Any other questions?
I guess the question is, who's at fault? And obviously, you are not at fault because you didn't do anything.
Right.
And the findings of the insurance company was that the city was not at fault because it wasn't something that just happened, and nobody designed it or did anything to make it happen and break. It was just an act of nature, and that's why it was declined. If we don't do anything here tonight, the only option that I can see for you to do is sue, but that can be expensive too.
Well, we can do that.
Yeah.
We have a good lawyer, and we also can go to the Minnesota Department of Commerce too, which we've been advised, but we didn't want to have to go to that point. We hoped we could that you could settle with your insurance company. I mean, you just can't just let them just say, we don't want to pay. I mean, is this liability insurance you have with him? I mean, why do you have insurance? Why do you have insurance with them if they aren't going to be backing you up?
Yeah.
Tom, do you have any input on that?
Other than to say we shouldn't carry this conversation further now that lawyers have been brought up and other things. I don't, it's a difficult position for the city to be in to talk about departing from the findings of its insurer.
Pardon me?
It's a difficult place for the city to be considering departing from the findings of its insurer.
Could you pull your mic closer, Tom?
Sorry about that. Struggling with this mic tonight, aren't I? What I said was I don't recommend that we go further with this conversation. The Grindys have now brought up the prospect of a lawsuit, first of all.
Well, that was suggested. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I don't mean any malice in bringing that up, but this is for the council here tonight. The question is, would they depart from the findings of their insurer who is denied coverage here? And if the council's inclined to do that, that's the council's call. But further conversation about autopsying what happened here and what coverages did or didn't apply is just not a prudent thing.
What I would like to maybe suggest is that I don't know that we need to, well, maybe we do, because we need to do some sort of action, but table the matter and maybe have some more, try to learn a little bit more before we make a final decision. That would be one possibility.
But we tabled it at this point and allowed, give the city attorney the opportunity to look into it from his legal standpoint, and maybe even it's, with our insurer, et cetera, and then because like he said, we got to be careful kind of what we say and stuff, but just because they've denied it doesn't mean that maybe the Grindys and everybody can't figure something else outside of here. So I don't know, but let Tom look at it and get back to us.
Both neighbors on both sides of us have had the sewer back into their basements too. Mrs. Vitale said that the insurance the city paid her $25,000 for her sewer backup. And I was wondering what would be the difference between her situation and my situation when it came to the insurance company.
And I think, just because of council's advice, we'd probably be best to not respond to anything more.
Okay.
And I don't mean that in any form of malice
No, I
either. But
understand this gets too lengthy, but
I mean, if there's something like that, I'm not aware of it, and in my time with the council or as mayor, so I would, if it's there, it may be something that may, there could be some answer sought as to, but would probably be best just to, that's why I suggested,
I'll move we table the request and the action on item 3 on tonight's agenda. Just at the table.
I'll second that, but till when?
Let's give it at least 2 months.
Is there other action aside from tabling, directing staff or
Well, that's
Tom to
where
do
my
something?
question actually lies, and it's direct. Tom, what can we, as a city, I'm trying to go through my mind of some of the things that I would want to see, but what can we look at, what can we discuss?
would that maybe be something that, as we should contact you about individually if we have questions, rather than doing it in this setting?
Yeah, I suppose you could. I don't recommend you tasking me as part of this tabling effort. I don't recommend you tasking me to delve further into the city's role in whatever happened here. You've got a determination from your insurer. It's a standard one from your insurer in situations like this, from my experience, about the city's culpability or negligence in this. That isn't something that's in the city's interest to dig further into.
Can you can you make a recommendation if we should or shouldn't table it, or should we just act on it tonight and say we're going to stand behind our insurer? What would be your recommendation?
If you think that there's other information that's pertinent to this consideration, that is outside of a legal sort of review of whose fault this is or who should have done what, then possibly. But otherwise, no, door number 2, Ross. I think that my advice to the city is that whatever information you would develop, if you're asking me what I think, you need to stand behind what your insurer has concluded here. To depart from that sets the stage for scenarios in the future that would be difficult for the city.
Based upon the attorney's opinion, I'll remove my motion.
And my second.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion that the city council agrees with the conclusion from the League of Cities on the claim.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Is it out of order then to say maybe our staff look into the totality of everything that's gone on the entire system?
I don't know that I'd want to go there at the moment. I mean, that'd be my take. Okay, moving on. Item E4, recommendation from the Planning Commission, request authorization for the city engineer to assess structure violation at 26130 Birch Avenue. Desmond, would you please bring us up to speed on that, please?
Absolutely.
Give us your comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the commission, yes, formal complaint had been filed with the planning department on the subject address. Approximately a couple of weeks ago, staff took the concern up to the planning commission as there would be difficulty establishing contact with the owner.
I'm not familiar with the location of this property.
Oh, I apologize.
Or is there a name to go with it, or, I mean,
It's just north of Poplar Avenue, just west of Pine.
And it's a residence?
You know where Church Street turns to dirt?
Yeah.
You go down to the corner, and you're
That's
kind of
Birch
going,
Avenue.
it's right on the corner.
It's the road where Norby's upholstery is.
Yeah, it's on the other
Between
side
there
of
and
Norby's.
Cullen.
Right as you turn the corner off of Church Street, it's right there on the left.
That way.
Okay, yeah, I would like to take a look at it.
So there's This one, and then
I think
there's
it's just,
like a house next to it.
It's falling down, it looks like they maybe threw a tarp over it.
Jenny is going to go ahead and pull up the GIS system so you can find it, see where exactly this property location is. It is in a residential zoning district, just north of Poplar Avenue. And approximately, probably 8 years ago, a permit was pulled on the subject site for the improvement of the existing structure. There was an addition that was sought, and that was partially built. As of 2013, it had not been completed, and I believe there was an extension request. So it is my understanding, there was a packet submitted to the council that had several pictures in it showing the condition of the structure. And then there's tarps across the roof, debris. The windows have been open for a couple of years from information that's been provided to staff by area residents. The structure does look that it may not be currently habitable. I brought this item to the Planning Commission as there was no way to establish contact with the owner as we were. So I was proceeding with requesting their consideration on whether or not this would be considered a building in an abandoned state, which would mean it would be a public safety hazard. As we were approaching the Planning Commission, the owner did contact staff on a completely different property that he had a question about. And recognizing the name, I began a conversation with him and informed him that we were proceeding forward with this request to the Planning Commission. In that conversation, he indicated that he would be looking to rehabilitate that structure and add to it. And so I did pass that information along to the commission. The commission felt that before any permit was issued on that site that would include the rehabilitation of that structure, that we would need to understand whether or not that is even a feasibility given its current state. So the request before you tonight, before the council, is to authorize the city attorney, the city engineer to do an analysis of the structure, or WSN and Mark Allen, and then report back the findings, subject, of course, to the property owner concurring and agreeing that we can access the property and enter the building. So if the council so directs, then the city engineer to do so, then we will contact the owner and ask for permission to access his site.
Okay. Thank you, Desmond.
I think the point was that he's looking for another permit to fix and rehabilitate what's already there and add on to it. And because of the deplorable, I'll use the word deplorable situation that we have, we didn't want to issue a permit for him to do that if we couldn't determine whether or not that what's there was habitable or had to be torn down. We don't have, the Planning Commission don't have the ability to authorize money to be spent like that. That's why it's before the council. I think that if you authorize the engineer to go look, whatever his decision is, that cost can be assessed in property taxes against the property itself. So we'll be paid back. But we need to know that information before we issue any permits to do anything on the structure.
Call me skeptical, but it appears from the condition of the inside and from looking at the outside that, and since he wasn't even calling about that property, he was calling about a different piece of property he had, is he just looking for more time to waste? I mean, that's kind of the way it feels to me. I don't know.
Well, we have to have some basis for denial if he wants to apply and ask for a permit to rebuild. We have to have some factual basis to do that without an engineer going through and looking at it. It's just our opinion and his opinion.
So he did actually make application?
Not yet, it's incomplete.
on a different piece of property.
No, he had contacted the planning department to discuss regulations on another piece of property. Not that it was under his ownership. I think he was looking at acquiring it, perhaps. I just happened to recognize the name in our discussion.
Had you not brought it up, would he have said anything, though?
No, I don't think so.
So, go ahead.
If we, either way we go, whether we try to, I'll just use condemn for lack of a better word, if we try to move forward to get something done with the structure, either way, are we not going to have an engineer look at it, Tom?
Well, this is kind of this is a follow on that conversation we had about Sportland earlier. This is, if the city goes down that route, this is potentially a nuisance abatement process under the statute that does require as much information as we can to support it, especially if it turns into a court contest. We have the pictorial evidence, so ideally we'd have something from an engineer that would tell us that we think that it's substandard, it's about ready to fall down, it's a fire hazard, all that stuff. But Desmond's on the right track here. We can't just go on somebody's property and do that. We do need to seek their consent initially. So I think he's on the right track, just asking you to authorize his attempt to get consent, and if he gets consent, then authorizing the engineer to do their work, and then we take it from there. If he doesn't get consent, then we can talk about it again about what to do.
I guess though my question was kind of either way, we need this probably we need this report to be done. I agree with asking them for permission and going down that route.
Russ. Yeah.
But I mean, we're not really wasting money, so to speak, to start with this, because probably if we want to move forward with it, which by the looks of the picture, I think we need to, we're going to need this either way.
It would be tremendously helpful to have that kind of intel if we headed to a contested court process under the nuisance abatement statute, yes.
Mark, do you have an idea how much that would cost?
Well, preliminary, to go in and do the initial assessment, I'll say will be somewhere probably $800 to $1,200.
Okay.
All right, and then depending on which way the city is going, I'm assuming parties will agree, this is, we'll give that information, then they'll proceed. But if the city needs to go into some other type of legal action, then there'll likely be a follow-up visit, because then unfortunately we may have to get into electrical and other issues.
Okay. I think that answers.
Mr. Mayor, unless there's anything else, I'd make a motion that we authorize the city planning and zoning administrator, city engineer, to conduct an assessment of the structure pending approval to enter onto the property by the property owner.
Second.
I got one other quick question.
Do you need me to say the address for the, okay.
The cars that are behind the property, are they on his property or are they on the next neighbor's property?
They are on his property as well.
How does he get them there? I mean, does he have to drive to his neighbor's property?
Without tabs, and plus that driveway is shared by the neighbors to the right of them.
So it's a shared driveway?
It's a shared driveway.
Okay.
The front car has no tabs.
But that little row of cars that I saw is on his property?
They are on his property.
Okay.
And that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, no, I get that.
If I look at this picture, then the roof line behind in the corner back there, is that yours?
That is our house.
Okay.
That's where that shot was taken.
Okay.
So I have some thoughts that I want to share here about this, and that is, it is kind of ironic that this comes up tonight, the same night that we discussed another piece of property. And on the other piece of property, there was a total unwillingness to spend any money to look to bring that to seek to get that property owner to do anything with that property. Now, depending on the decision that we make here, we may be going a totally different route and saying, oh, well, this is whatever reasons, this is a different piece of property, but we're willing to spend lawyer money and maybe go to court and spend a bunch of money on this. I find a real, that's troubling to me.
I guess there's differences there. First of all,
we weren't discussing whether, on the Sportland Corners property, we weren't discussing whether we were going down that road or not. We were discussing whether we would do TIF. Had TIF failed, then we could discuss to go down that road. Second of all, this, obviously this house is missing a roof. The windows are open. The building is more stabilized at Sportland, just from what I see, but we're not even, now we're asking for the homeowner to work with us because they may want to do something with it. So, and so we're not discussing any further other than to proceed on there with an engineer, which is a reasonable cost, I believe, for the initial, to see whether this house is worth saving, so that if he wants to do something, planning and zoning have that information to know that, yes, this is something that can be viably done. So I see the two as completely separate. And I think to draw comparisons to it is not fair, but I see them as separate.
Second question that I have, and this maybe is more for Tom and maybe Desmond, but does the city even have the authority to, well, I guess it does have the authority to request this, but I'm not sure that where the city says that they can do much with this property. I mean, without another, I mean, to me it just seems like there's mishmash of the way we're doing things here.
Well,
Sure,
I can-
slight differences, but I failed to see consistency.
Well, at this point, I can answer the question because I've had some experience with that in the past. The courts are reluctant to have a governmental entity come in and do anything on your property without proper legal process. This is the first step in getting the information. If it's deemed to be uninhabitable, then we know, and we can deny any of the application to remodel and stuff like that. And if it continues, then we have the process to go through, go to court, and have it torn down. So it's a step, and we're taking the first step.
Does the city have and this is for Tom, does the city have the authority to say, our city with our ordinances, to say that, well, its current state is uninhabitable, possibly, if it's deemed that, and to deny them a building permit when they could potentially fix it up to where it is? It seems like it gets really messy.
I thought you were going to ask me, is there a process for the city to do anything about this if it finds out that it's a hazardous building? And that process wouldn't be under your ordinances, it's under the statute. It's that nuisance abatement statute I'm telling you about. The idea of pulling a permit to fix something, I'm not sure how that does or doesn't relate to that. But with the right information, could the city support an effort, and if it becomes a court effort necessary, to abate this nuisance? Yes.
At a cost, of course.
I guess I'd also like to add that this isn't a residential area where there's lots of kids around. They have full access to get into that house. There's not locked. If you go back to Sportland, that building's locked up. Nobody can get in there unless they try harder. It's in a commercial area. I see the two as two totally separate entities, and I think to have this in a neighborhood and not to try and address it and try to address it with the homeowner like we're doing, I think would just not be the right thing to do, I guess.
I just like that. I kind of see them as apples and oranges too, but I think we're getting the cart way ahead of the horse here. We're not talking about.
Yeah, we're talking his permission.
The guy might want to build something, and P&Z needs information to give him a yay or a nay. That's
Right.
all we're talking about here. So,
Right.
do we have a first and a second?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd call the question.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item E5, recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission in regards to the Grotkin Meets and Bounds subdivision. Desmond?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this This particular property was brought before you last month for a rezoning to shoreland residential from open space residential, in which it was approved. The applicant is now looking to split the 3-acre parcel into 2 separate parcels, one being a 1.81 acre parcel and the other being 1.17 acres. One of the questions that came up during the commission meeting was that there is a wetland on a portion of the site, and the commission did have some concerns about whether or not the property was sized large enough to accommodate a septic system or an alternative site. And so the applicant did provide additional information from a certified designer that showed that there are potentially up to 3 sites. So that question had been answered to the Planning Commission, so they have forwarded a recommendation of approval on this split to the City Council, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Any questions, Council?
Just one quick question, and it's just for, I'm trying to remember what I read here, but what are they have any plans for the property other than just the lot split?
Okay, the applicant is here, and the applicant could speak about that.
Okay.
Is there relevance to the question? Can you explain it to me, or I just want to understand?
Well, I just was curious. I guess there's no I'm just curious if we're going to maybe get some more housing. I'm just curious.
Hi, my name is Jack Trotkin, and 21748 Tall Timbers Road. I do have a plan for it. I want to build I need a project. I'm a general contractor in Minneapolis, but I'm going to build not only a kind of a storage building for some of my stuff with a shop, but it's going to look like I have a plan already drawn that it'll look like a house. And it can be used as a house or a shop.
Okay.
So I did bring a copy of my plan, and I also have it's going to look kind of like my house on Tall Timbers. Okay. So I'm going to kind of duplicate the same thing.
Okay. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay. Thanks. You guys have worked hard tonight.
Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor, I move the City Council approve the meets and bounds subdivision number 010-18 as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E6, recommendation from the Gull Lake Trail Steering Committee, accept change of Gull Lake Trail location, to the Lower Roy Lake Road option, I guess, is probably the best way to put that.
I can give a little background on that if needed. The Gull Lake Trail Steering Committee, as you may remember, at one point had made the recommendation that the trail come further down County Road 77 before veering off through the north through private property. After discussion with property owners and et cetera, we've decided not to pursue that and have since decided to change the route of the trail to follow Lower Roy Lake Road and ultimately to where it connects into Hazelwood from there on out. So it's the recommendation of the committee to accept that.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the change of the Gull Lake Trail location to the Lower Roy Lake Road route as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, but I have a question. The way it's listed up here, accept the change, I'm assuming that this is approval, but it's still preliminary. You haven't decided which properties you're going to cross and what's the width or anything. It's a proposed trail I'll use the word corridor at this point.
Correct.
It's nothing cast in stone that can't be changed a little bit from what's on the paper, so as long as we understand that.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E7, recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission and the Gull Lake Steering Committee to accept 2 additional members to the Gull Lake Steering Committee. And do we have names, or is it just to open 2 spots?
No, we brought in 2 members, and now I'm drawing a blank on their names.
Larry Petron and
Bill Meyer?
Bill Meyer.
Yep.
Yeah. So we had a seat vacated, and had 2 very qualified applicants, and decided to take them both on.
I think they'll both bring a lot of value to
Yes.
this committee.
Yes, both
Absolutely.
have engineering backgrounds. Larry Petron has a engineering and cost estimating and construction management background. The other gentleman has a variety of engineering.
I'll move to accept the 2 additional members of the Gull Lake Trail Steering Committee as presented.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E7, no, E8, recommendation from the Public Works Committee, accept 2018 patching and crack filling quote.
Yeah, this was the quote for our annual, the annual patch and crack filling and patching. Anderson Brothers submitted us was the only one that submitted us a bid. It was put out to Anderson Brothers. It was also put out to Knife River, which is, just so everyone is, Knife River and Tri-City Paving are now Knife River. So they purchased Knife River. We didn't get anything back. So we went with the Anderson Brothers quote. If I remember right, it's a little less than it has been in past some years, and a little more in others. This this does not include Hazelwood, which is a whole separate project on its own because of its condition that it's in. So
It's also quite a bit less than what was budgeted for.
yes, this is all budgeted and, like you said, less than. Yeah.
I have a question to the committee members. On the bid here, it says $11,561.06.
That's for crack sealing.
Yeah, but then the next one, it says $11,467. I'm just wondering, that's $1,000 difference, or $100 difference.
You actually add all 3 numbers together. They're different, they're all different areas, so the 11, and the 40.
Well,
or
there's
65.
there's only $100 difference. I just was guessing that there was an error in entering or something.
Yeah.
I didn't see where the
That's-
$100 came
The
from.
second page, there's a typo.
No.
Or isn't there?
No, it's 3 separate bids, correct?
The second page is for a paver patching that has, full width. So the numbers are very similar, but they're 2
Different
different
process.
operations.
Different process, so it's all 3 numbers.
So it's 3 different numbers.
Okay, so it's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Why do you do that to me?
Well, I just make it interesting, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve the quote from Anderson Brothers for crack sealing and patching as presented, not to exceed the $65,210.19.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Johnson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E9, recommendation, Public Works Committee, the sale of surplus equipment. What equipment are we getting rid of or looking to get rid of?
We're looking at the 77 Chevy tanker truck that's out there. Was used a few times, but it's honestly not necessary, and it costs more to keep it running for the few times that they do need it, and they have alternatives that work better. So it can be, we're looking at putting it on gov bids. Yeah, thank you. And then there's the John Deere sickle mower. Pretty much nobody uses a sickle mower anymore. Maybe some townships or somewhere, somebody will use it, but.
Great yard decoration.
And then there's a snow wing. This is a large snow wing that is for the green John Deere tractor. problem is it's too big for the majority of our streets. So they have a shorter one. And this one is still in good shape and has value. It's just sitting there giving birds a place to roost. That's about the size of it. But it can probably, it's another thing that we don't need, and all these things can go up on Gov Deals. And we did discuss, well, Tom, can you answer me, remind me, we discussed some approximate costs, of what they could or should possibly bring in, but they're,
I don't think that's,
if anyone's interested in that.
I don't know that, let's just move, I would just suggest we move forward.
I'll make a motion that we declare the surplus equipment and authorize staff to sell them on items on Gov Deals as presented here.
Second.
Second by Jacobson. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item E10, resolution adopting Crow Wing County all-hazard mitigation plan. Anybody want to present anything on that, or?
I can just briefly speak to it. The county has prepared their plan, and similar to a few other things we do, that we just adopt their plan as our own and have that documented. So they're requesting all of the municipalities within the county to do that and operate under the same program.
Is there any cost?
No.
No.
There's no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Move the resolution adopting the all-hazard mitigation plan.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item E11, resolution approving State of Minnesota Master Subscriber Agreement on behalf of the Office of the State Court Administration with the City of Nisswa on behalf of its city prosecutor for access to court to the Court Data Services System for governmental agencies.
So move.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item E12, memo from City Administrator Jenny Max, new policy and application for city commissions and committees.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have a number of questions and suggestions for this. I wonder if we can just table it for one meeting so I can talk with Jenny, and so instead of taking up a lot of time tonight.
I have a few questions about it too, so.
I would make that motion to table this to the next meeting.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Tabled. Item E13, recommendation from the Personnel Committee, cellular devices policy. Any questions about that by council?
My only question is, everyone's kind of on board with it?
This will just provide options for staff. For those who don't wish to have two phones, they can opt, if they're not currently using a stipend, they can go to a stipend. It won't impact what their options are right now. They can stay with what they have at this time. Provides a little more flexibility for the staff, so if there were no concerns brought forward.
Question? I'm not necessarily against it, but eligible positions included the pickle manager. How do you justify that?
I did not change any current practice. So the positions that are listed on this are the current positions that receive a stipend. I believe that's more of because manager's schedule really revolves between potentially 8 a.m. and 2 a.m., depending on what his shift is. So he may not be at the pickle at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday because he has to work 10 o'clock at night that day. So I think it was to provide access for staff to call him if there were issues with deliveries or other things that may happen. So that was probably the logic back then, but has been in place for a while.
What if the plan is less than $50? Do we still pay him $50? I mean, I have a smartphone plan right now that only costs me $20.
It's a great question. It's, because it is a taxable item, after tax, it nets them to about $35. So was the reason for the $50, is to say that should cover a portion of their plan, but it can certainly be adjusted. There would probably be some staff feedback if that were to be changed, but we just give an opportunity to have that discussion.
I'm actually comfortable with it. In the end, it may very well save the city some money.
Yeah, I'm not against the program, I'm just wondering about the cost.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation policy, to recommend the approved policy for the use of cellular devices as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ryan. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor, Don, did you have something, or?
No.
Okay.
I'm just groaning.
Okay. Well, Lisa's not yawning quite yet anyway, huh? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation from the Personnel Committee to approve Medica as the city's health insurance provider.
We did that already.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well,
It's done.
we did do that at the meeting earlier, but I think it'd be fair to just state that for anyone that is here, that we approved the recommendation to switch from Health Partners to Medica at our budget meeting. So just throw that out there.
It was a publicized meeting, special meeting.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the lawyer.
Well, it was still a recommendation, right? Shouldn't you ratify that through a motion?
We did. We made a motion.
We actually did it at the
Special
earlier meeting.
Published meeting.
Well, they're here.
We were discussing insurance, and they went for it.
Item E15. Any questions, get a hold of Jenny tomorrow morning. E15, personnel updates for July of 2018.
I'll make a motion that we accept the personnel updates as stipulated in the E15.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E16, resolution accepting donations.
I'll move the resolution accepting donations as presented.
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion.
Just a public thanks to the Lions Club for again supporting the fire department and our city. They are generous when it comes to that.
Yes, they are. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Old business, we have none. Mayor has nothing to make a speech about. Council members? Don?
I could be here for another half an hour but I won't.
Okay, Gary, moving on.
Yeah, just a quick comment, I guess. I know the TIF thing was, that was a tough one for us, and for all of us, even for those who voted yes for it. But I appreciate the discussion we had. I think we handled that as a council very well, so I'm giving us all a pat on the back for that.
Yes. Thank you. Ross, anything to report? John?
I just wanted to mention something that I had read in the P&Z Commission report, and I want the P&Z and the city to think very strongly about, they tabled it, so they're obviously putting a lot of thought into it, but I think we should I would like to see us do something along the lines of what happened with the sign ordinance, Don, when it comes to this color palette thing for the Highway 371 business districts and stuff. I think getting those people, the property owners, business people involved in it would be, we could get a much better idea than just trying to leave it on a commission members to make a decision that may or may not be popular. I think they deserve to get as much feedback as possible before they have to go down that road, so that's my 2 cents.
I would second that wholeheartedly.
And then if people don't want to get involved and they don't want to say anything, they get to live
The
with it.
Planning Commission will consider your comments.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Ross, don't disappear. Okay.